Welcome to episode 226 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today we're going to be finding out about skiing in Hokkaido in Japan, a drugs bust in Verbier, a cable car crash in Val Thorens, a World Cup racing update, and what it's like skiing down Mont Blanc. Now, my name is Iain Martin. I would like to introduce my guest today. I am delighted to welcome Jocelyn Cockle, better known as Floss from Free Flow Ski Coaching based in Tignes. Hi, Floss. How are you?
Hi, Iain, and thanks for having me today.
It's a pleasure. Whereabouts are you today?
I'm actually I'm doing the call from London, and I'll be back in the French Alps on Friday.
Very jealous that you'll be out there again, although I happen to know you've already been skiing in Tignes, but we'll come on to that shortly. Okay, also joining us today, regular guests will recognise the mellifluous tones of Mike Richards, who last appeared on the podcast reporting from the Northern Ski Show in episode 224. I think this is about his 10th time on the show now. It could be more. It's always a pleasure to speak to him. Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Morning, Iain. Great to be back. Yeah, hopefully people are not bored of my voice yet.
Absolutely not. Whereabouts are you today, Mike?
I'm in sunny Cardiff at the moment. It's quite cold, and we're hoping for another little bit of a snowstorm to come through soon.
Okay, excellent. Well, that actually leads me into my next question, because I always like to start off by asking my guests where they skied or snowboarded last. And Floss, I'm guessing for you, it was, well, probably Tignes. I think I know the answer already because I was watching your video earlier about first turns in Tignes.
But yeah, it's the first ski this season is in Tignes. On the first day of the glacier, I went up on the 23rd of November, which was amazing.
And what was the snow like then?
You know, I was really surprised. Above 2,500 meters, we've had a lot of snow. It was really good condition. And I don't know if you're aware, but on top of the glacier, you don't have any snow cannons or artificial snow. So it's all natural. And it just completely surprised me, to be honest. So at high altitude, the snow was great. And then since then, we've had probably about a metre and a half that's come in, unfortunately, with a lot of wind. But I will test it out on Saturday. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, and temperatures have been, relatively high, because I've been looking at freezing point. It seems to be going up to around 3,000 metres.
Yeah, I've really seen a difference over the last 3 years. I would call it more like yo-yo effect. It's very cold, then very high, and you can have a real change from up to 15, 20 degrees in 24 hours, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, okay, but the temperatures are going down again. And I saw it, it has been low enough for the snow cannons to be on the lower slopes. So I think, it's the 28th of November. Tignes is already open, evidently. It'd be interesting to hear back from you during the course of the season to see how the snow conditions go. Let's move on to Mike. Mike, what about you? When was the last time you were skiing or snowboarding?
I was very fortunate to ski pre-Storm Bert, which we'd think that a lot of places got really hit by Storm Bert, which was a bonus. But unfortunately in Wales, it came through as rain. But myself and my regular ski partner, Chris, we got 3 days out in the Brecon Beacons last week, the 20th, 21st and 22nd. 20th in Hay Bluff, right on the border between England and Wales, right parallel to Offa's Dyke. That was a great day, no wind, plenty of snow, great turns, and we had a four-wheel drive. We were able to drive a good way up. And then on the Friday and the Saturday, then we came and had to hike up to the top of Pen y Fan. No lift access, obviously, in Wales. A little bit scratchy, a little bit windblown, but we still were able to ski top to bottom through the tufts and the light cover. But then the rain came, unfortunately, with Storm Bert and washed it all away. So we just eagerly anticipating when the next fall is going to come down. But a good early start for us.
I love that. Long-term listeners will know that we've talked about skiing in Wales with you on the podcast on regular occasions, particularly during that awful period we had during lockdown. But it's great to know that you've been out on the slopes already. I'm just interested. You probably have a good quiver of skis. What skis are you brave enough to take out for skiing in Wales in November?
My only ski, actually, because I have had a quiver in the past, but because I'm doing a lot of traveling and, airlines now are trying to claw back a lot of the money that they've lost over that COVID period. They're charging more and more to transport your own equipment. If I was in regular Alpine bindings, I think for lots of my holidays, I would just rent because it makes more sense. The cost factor, it doesn't really differentiate. But I ski in ski touring boots primarily, and I've got ski touring bindings, so I've got my own rig. So I ski them until they die, basically, no matter where I am and whatever the conditions are, and then replace.
Well, I guess maybe that leads me on to you mentioning ski hire there. Listener, if you're thinking about skiing this winter and you're starting to plan for it, I'm pleased to confirm Intersport supporting the Ski Podcast again. And that means all podcast listeners can save money on their ski hire. You just need to use the code Ski Podcast at intersportrent.com, or you can take the link that's in the show notes and your discount will automatically be applied at the checkout. Now, we mentioned skiing. Floss has been in Tignes. Mike's been in Wales. We do have a snow report for this episode, and that is from another regular contributor that listeners will know. It's Alex Irwin from the YouTube channel 150 Days of Winter. He's based in Courchevel, but in the last week, he skied in Tignes and Val Thorens. So let's have a listen to that.
Hi Iain, Alex from 150 Days of Winter with your one-stop shop for snow reports around the French Alps. In a double-header of the weekend, I spent Saturday in Val Thorens for the Grand Premiere opening and Sunday in Tignes for the end of their opening week. Let's start at the highest point of the three valleys with Val Thorens. With over a metre of snow, the resort looks in great shape. However, as parts of the recent storm, high winds removed much of the snow from exposed higher points. Val Thorens managed to open more slopes than last year, giving access to most of the resort. However, last week, the Cime de Caron telepherique was involved in an accident as it was transporting builders up to the peak. 6 were injured, 2 seriously, but everyone is now okay. The state of the damage of the cable car is being looked into. Hopefully, it won't be out of action for the forthcoming season. Val Thorens' other project was the upgrade of the Deux Lacs chair, which has now been upgraded to a bubble. The only thing that let down the opening was the fact that everyone in France who wanted to go skiing turned up, resulting in very crowded pistes, and the snow suffered. A day later in the Espace Killy, Tignes was almost the polar opposite, with roughly the same snow coverage, but the resort was much quieter. The only downside was the top of the Grand Mont Glacier was closed, probably because of the ample snow. The piste down to Val Thorens offered probably the most challenging ski of the day. The snow around Val Thorens and Tignes Lac was great, though off-piste was not worth the possible damage to equipment. Both days were good, but if Val Thorens was good, Tignes was great. You can check out the snow on both resorts on my YouTube channel, and on that bombshell, ciao.
So that was great to hear from Alex, and we're going to be hearing from Alex again later on this winter. I will actually be out in Courchevel in, just over a week's time. Now, long-term listeners will know, back in episode 33, we discussed drug dealers in ski resorts. That was after the 2019 fire in Courchevel turned out to be caused by, let's call it a dispute between an armed cocaine supplier and his dealers. Well, in bad news for patrons of the Farm nightclub, Swiss media reported earlier this week that police arrested 15 dealers in Verbier. It was a long-run investigation that uncovered the sale of large quantities of narcotics, apparently including cocaine, ketamine, ecstasy, cannabis, and they also arrested 20 consumers. So, interesting story. Alex reported from Val Thorens, the Cime de Caron cable car is not running at the moment. Unfortunately, that was damaged before the resort had opened. It's unclear yet how long it will be closed for, but it's kind of ironic because the Celia cable car in Courchevel, that's been closed for 3 years now. It's only due to open next week. That's actually why I'm going out there. Hopefully I'll be on that inaugural running of the Celia cable car. But I guess for the three valleys, it would not be ideal if one of their major cable cars closed, just as another one was coming back. Now, let's turn to racing news. One huge bit of news in the world of racing since our last podcast is that Lyndsey Vonn has announced she plans to return to the racing circuit. Now, this hasn't happened yet, but the world will be watching. Apparently, she's planning to debut at Beaver Creek. She's 40 years old now, hasn't raced for quite some time. So that will be fascinating on the back of Marcel Hirscher coming back to racing as well. From an update of what else has been going on in the world of racing, let's hear from Matt Garcka. He was on the show in episode 225 on what he's been covering on the Skiing is Believing podcast in the last couple of weeks.
Hi everyone, it is Matt Garcka here from the Skiing is Believing podcast, I just wanted to give you a quick update on how the Alpine ski racing has been going down the last couple of weekends, with a special attention on the Brits. So it was Levy a couple of weeks back. I was there with the podcast, doing a bit of reporting, got some really great content done. Mikaela Shiffrin winning the women's slalom on Saturday before Dave Riding came into 5th position after the first run on Sunday, with both Billy Major and Laurie Taylor not in the second run, crossing the line but unable to qualify. Dave couldn't quite take full advantage of that first run position and only managed to take 16th place. There was another chance last weekend in Gurgle, that the resort that is the head sponsor for Dave Riding, and he was once again positioned in 5th place after the first run, a day after Mikaela Shiffrin had made it 2 wins out of 2 to start the slalom season. It came down to Billy, and he was unable to conclude his first run. It was a DNF. And Laurie Taylor kicked it into the top 30, 29th position after the first run, managed to move up to 23rd place after the second run. So some really good points for him to get on the board for the season. And then Dave, obviously coming from quite late in the second run field, managed to salvage a 7th place finish. So some decent points for him too, to get right amongst it at the early stage of the slalom season. That is just a very quick update from me. A thank you to the Ski Podcast and Iain for his continued support. And I'll ski you very soon.
So that's really interesting to hear from Matt there. And I think listeners will know that Skiing is Believing podcast and the Ski Podcast have teamed up. We have formed the Ski Podcast network. Mike was just speaking to me earlier while we were listening to Matt's update. You're also interested in the other, I guess, big story, although possibly a bit more predictable, which is that Mikaela Shiffrin is honing in on her 100th World Cup win.
Yeah, huge achievement, across all disciplines. She's, the fantastic skier, arguably the best skier of all time when you consider the amount of wins she's had across all the different disciplines. She's hoping to record her 100th victory at Killington in Vermont this coming weekend. And like the old adage, if you want snow, organise an event. Killington hasn't had a good start and it hasn't been that cold to make the snow. But they've got a storm system coming in over the next couple of days. Hopefully they'll have a combination of man-made and natural snow, which will allow her to go for that century of wins.
I guess that probably will be the story from this weekend, although I'm not sure I go along with your theory there that, if you want snow, organise an event, because unfortunately for Zermatt and Chavinia last year and the year before, it didn't work out that way. While we're looking at Team GB, I can reveal I was lucky enough to interview British halfpipe skier Zoe Atkin last week. I will be releasing that episode later on this winter. Really interesting. She's on great form. She's had 6 podiums in her last 7 events. She will be competing next in China in about 10 days' time, as will Mia Brooks, who will be competing in the World Cup Big Air this weekend in China. So it'll be really interesting to follow how those two get on this winter. Don't forget that if you haven't listened to our special equipment episodes yet, maybe you have, but they're also available on YouTube as well. So if you want to know what the best skis, ski boots, jackets, goggles, gloves, socks, helmets are, and you'd like to see what Al and I look like, then head over to the Skipedia YouTube channel. I will put a link into the show notes for that. And finally, in our news section, I'd like to thank everyone who completed our listener survey. I'm delighted to confirm the winners have been drawn, and they were, drum roll, Oliver Rutman and Faye Morton. And they win a whole load of prizes, including a carve too for Oliver. Congratulations, guys. Thanks to everybody who responded to that survey. All those kind words. I've read every single piece of the feedback. It's all taken on board. It's very hard to please everyone. It's interesting. Some people say, oh, I'm not interested in snow reports. And other people say, oh, I love the snow reports. They're the best thing about it. I'll be sharing some of those results via our WhatsApp channel. And what's that? Well, listen on to the end to find out. But if you have a little search on WhatsApp, you'll find the Ski Podcast on there. Now, we're going to turn to our guest today. We're going to start off with Floss, if that's okay. You are in team. You are a qualified ski instructor. You also have a huge YouTube channel with around 5,000 subscribers. But I wondered if I could take you back a little bit. How did you get into skiing? How did all of this start?
It's actually a very different story and totally different to most. My My parents were separated, and my dad decided to have a winter holiday, and it was a winter holiday for the three of us because we're triplets. And when he was 9, he took us on the first ski holiday. And for me, it was disastrous. Like, I seriously, no joke for I couldn't turn left or right. And I just was one of those really bad students that got demoted and got, taken down to every group. And even the end of the week, the instructor, he actually said to my dad at the time, he said, skiing is not for your daughter. And we're kind of from a stoic, like warrior family. And my dad turned around and was like, we're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. So then the next year we went, and it was just following these holidays where I kind of hated it and, walking with the heavy skis, 20 minutes to the lift. Until I actually grew to like it when I found speed, probably around 13 and 14. And I was that mental child skiing off in the distance.
I mean, several thoughts crossed my mind. Firstly, I'm a father of twins, and I thought that was difficult. Having triplets would be super challenging. But that's kind of getting into skiing. But how does that lead to becoming a ski instructor? Did you just fall in love with the sport and decide that's where you wanted to stay?
Wow. I was a chalet girl on my first season in Koimiya at 19. And I remember sitting on a chairlift. I always loved skiing and I often skied on my own. And I had this really bad hangover. And as I was sitting on next to the chairlift, there was a trainer from the Verbier instructors called Brian Fern. And he got chatting to me. And all of a sudden, we went for a ski. And I saw him ski. And I was like, oh, wow, he is a ski god. Like, I want to ski like him. And then we got chatting. And he actually invited me on the foundation of, the levels to become a ski teacher. And that's where it all started. And it was Martin Rowe, if you are listening. Thank you, Martin. And he took my first assessment. And it sort of was just a long journey after that, Iain, a long journey.
And I think that, the rules have changed over time, but, started off going through the basic qualifications. But ultimately, at some point, to be able to teach in France, you have to go through things like the equivalence and the Euro test. And you were one of the first British women to pass the Euro test.
So, it was new, different qualifications then. And you have to go through a test technique generally to then allow 5 years of teaching, which was a slalom test. But the biggest obstacle for me was to finish all the levels and to do the French equivalence, which is called the Euro test. And that's a GS race. And you're competing with, the bottom of the World Cup people, and you've got a certain time frame to beat. And that was really hard for me. Like most people, you can complete all the system, but to actually finish and to seal your positioning in France and to teach in France, you need the Euro test.
I've always found that system kind of strange. Like, to become a driving instructor, you don't need to be able to do really fast laps of Brands Hatch or Silverstone, do you? Yet to become a ski instructor, you've got to be able to get down a GS course within a certain time.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. It doesn't help you with the coaching side at all. But I have to be honest, I wouldn't be the skier I am today if it wasn't there.
Okay, and you're now teaching in team, but the YouTube channel, when did you start posting onto that?
Oh, well, unfortunately, it was COVID. And, COVID's like a double-edged sword for everybody. With the winter, which most people are aware, that obviously everything closed down in March 2020. And sadly, I lost my dad to COVID in April. Unfortunately, and then I lost my stepdad 10 months after. So I wasn't very good in my mind, and the whole ski industry closed down, and I lost my business, and so I tried to turn things around, and I thought to myself, oh, what can I do to actually reach to my audience and make good? What can keep me occupied? So I thought, oh, why not start a YouTube channel? And there I am. 2021, I started posting.
I find that really interesting, your comments about COVID, because for me, for sure, working in the travel industry and specifically the ski industry, it did feel like everything was coming to an end with COVID. You wondered if it would continue. And doing the podcast for me were so vital to my mental health during that time. And I had so much feedback from listeners saying, thank you so much for keeping us in contact. And I imagine you probably had that same sort of engagement on the channel. What type of videos do you typically post on there?
I do a snow forecast video every week, and then I try and do tutorials as well. But I try and keep it as more as a skiers channel, that you can get in contact with me and I can help and share my advice. So it's a friendly sort of channel. It's not a channel like, look at me, this is how you improve your technique. It's more about information and trying to create videos that people want to see. My live lessons on the actually mountain really have gone well as well. And there's actually some videos of mine, like how to ski in 2 hours, which has gone up to 159,000 views, which is insane. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's watching and listening and supporting.
But I wondered actually today if I could ask you about a specific kind of adventure that you've had. I know you've skied in volcanoes in Patagonia, but I think this was something else that you did during COVID, which was climbing and then skiing down the north face of Mont Blanc.
What can I say, Iain? It's probably one of the best things I've ever done. And it wasn't my idea. It was my friend Paul, who lives in Les Deux Alpes, and he got in touch with me sort of end of May 2021, sort of mid-May, and we saw each other, and he said, look, I really want to climb Mont Blanc. I really was like, no, I really pooed the idea. No, it's crazy, I don't want to climb Mont Blanc, no. And then all of a sudden we had some great snow, and it was getting colder and colder, and he planted that seed in my head. And I was thinking, wow, I don't actually want to climb it, but maybe we can ski it. So then I was sort of getting into the books, getting into all the research and reading about it. And then I thought, wow, we can actually ski it. We only had 5 or 6 weeks to prepare.
So what time of year are we talking about here? You said there was snow, but this isn't during winter, right?
No, this is actually in springtime. So we actually started, it was actually a 4-day adventure. And we started on June the 7th, 2021. I decided to pick the later window of going through, so it gives us a little bit more time because we just needed altitude training. So I was lapping the Grand Mont in Tignes. We also need to do altitude, sort of staying over in Torino in a hut in Italy. So there's a lot of, pieces of the jigsaw to do it. So I just need a little bit more time. But we actually summited on June the 10th, just after 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, but just to track you back a little bit then. So it's a 4-day adventure and, you climbed and skied. So with your climbing, where did you start from?
So we started from the Plan de Guil.
And just to clarify, listener, we're talking about the mid-station of the Aiguille du Midi lift on the way up to the Aiguille du Midi.
Yeah,
so it starts from the mid-station.
It takes 2 days to climb. So we started from the mid-station. So day 3 and day 4 was the mid-station. And then we went up to Grand Mullet Hut, which was just over 3,000 meters. And then on the last summit day, the last day, we left at 2:30 in the morning, just short of 2:30 in the morning. And then we summited, climbed up. A mixture of ski touring and also boot crampons. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, you're making it sound very straightforward there. But from Plan d'Aiguille, if you're looking up at the Aiguille du Midi, then you're going off towards your right-hand side towards the Grand Mullet Hut. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. The mileless, ski touring route. It was actually,
and you were walking from there presumably in June, right? Was there snow at Plan d'Aiguille?
No, there was actually snow. We did a little bit of a hike, nothing, extensive, but mainly ski touring. Yeah, we could put our skins on straight away and go up. It was amazing. The change in the terrain has changed so much. We had a lot of crevasses that we had to climb into to then climb out to pass in the Ronde. It was really special, quite an experience, because you can hear all these seracs falling down around you, and that the mountain's warming up, and you just got to keep moving in that environment to be safe.
Yeah. Was anyone you were with a mountain guide or had substantial experience?
Yeah. So I took Ben Bradford from Vertical Frontiers, and so he was the mountain guide. So between me, him, and also my friend Paul, we worked together as a team, and we sort of had a look at our strengths and weaknesses, and we built together as a team.
So you've gone to the Grand Mullet Hut. And then you mentioned that you summited around 9:30, so you must have left pretty early. And I'm thinking that that particular morning was much more technical.
Yeah, it's totally technical. With head torch, you can't see. We had a little bit of wind and we had a light dusting of snow, so there wasn't any tracks put in. We were the first people out of the hut. There was steep section as you come across, which you can't really see. So you're kick turning up probably to 40 degrees at one section. You're also traversing across the side of the mountain, which have avalanche debris. So you're trying to go through past that as well. And then you've got a section where there's also these overhanging seracs which fall down. It's probably about 300 meters, and you just need to go as fast as you possibly can because you just don't know when they're going to fall down. And unfortunately, they lost on the mountain three to four climbers the week before in that particular area.
So you're all roped together, I presume, for these sections here?
Yeah, not all of them. It depends on how the terrain is. For example, under the seracs, we took the rope off, and it was literally every skier for himself, really, just going across the seracs. And then after that, we're all roped up together. And we did, which was interesting, we did most of it on ski crampons as well, which slowed us down a lot because you can't have the flow of the skins and actually cover much terrain with the ski crampons.
But you get that extra grip to give you a bit more security.
Yeah, you do. And there was such a hard air underneath that we really needed that. And with the transitioning time, because you have to be so quick of changing everything, that we just wanted to keep moving. So we just kept the ski crampons on until we actually got to the base of the summit. And that's when we took our skis off, boot crampons and ice axes came out, and off we go.
Okay, yeah. So you had your skis on until what point, and then you boot packed?
Just over 4,000. Yeah, 4,000 meters. So, and that's quite high altitude. So it was all great there. I mean, the views were absolutely amazing. The sunrise, I just can't, tell you. It was just breathtaking. We had a group behind us, which sadly they didn't want to go in front of us because we were trying to be self-efficient and trying to save our energy, which I did mention, to the group that they can go and break tracks, because when we were breaking tracks and changing leader, it was taking a lot more energy. But we actually led that day and put the tracks in. So thanks to Ben mainly for that. And then it was just around 4,000 that we started to transition again.
And how long did you spend at the summit then before you then decide to turn around and come back?
Well, there's one. When you get to over 4,000 meters, you never know how your body's cope. It was the highest I've ever been. And it was so difficult to actually put your left foot in front of your right. It took a while. So we were really probably an hour and a half behind the summit time I wanted. And you're so relieved there, and obviously you've got to get the film, but I was really concerned. I really needed, I could see that the mountain and changing, the temperature was increasing. Literally, we were there probably, I'd say 12 minutes, unfortunately. There was no picnic or champagne at the top. It was quickly transition as quick as you can, take a photograph, transition whoever's not ready, and then we needed to go.
And in terms of going down then, so you ski down, are you skiing from the summit?
Yeah, from the very summit of Mont Blanc. Yeah, we skied the central line, which is very rare on the north face. And I would say it would be the best turns ever. But at the time, 4,000, just 800, I was struggling to get that oxygen in. And with 4 days in our legs, because I really wanted 2 days respite in between the 4 days, but we couldn't have it because the weather window suddenly changed. So we had to go. I was pretty tired in the legs, but I still had a lot in the bank. But yeah, we skied down, and it was, I can't tell you, it's just absolutely amazing. The views where you're on top of the world, and yeah, it wasn't a really technical ski down. It was just, you had to be really focused. There was some seracs. It sounds very heroic. It wasn't. So, you've got like some crevasses as well that you can see, and you have to sort of ski and jump over them. And you've got to read the snow and where to go. yeah, where it's safe, where it's to stop as well, because you really don't want to stop much on the glacier because it's all changing and the snow bridges change as well. So it becomes a lot more complicated of where the islands of safety are, which is very different to the off-piste. And you can imagine the snow type from 4,800 all the way down to 1,600 are very different.
Absolutely. And, I've been to a few places, Le Grave off the back of Montfort, Verbier, Grand Tourmalet, I think, which were no fall zones. I'm thinking most of where you were skiing were no fall zones, right?
Yeah, I have to be honest. Yeah, it's very different. I made sure that I had good insurance before I left, and I told my family, how much I loved them. I don't think my mum and sister really got it. And then my brother started reading up and he was like, oh. But yeah, there was a lot of fall zones and you have to be really confident in your ability. And I'd definitely say the kick turning with crampons on, with a hard layer at a steep, narrow terrain. Yeah, there's a lot of movement and, error. And the worst could happen to you. So I was just very pleased that we all managed to go up and come down, and very lucky to do it, because a lot of people, it's their dream to do it, and to get the weather conditions right and the snow conditions right and your right team, you've got to get all those jigsaws, pieces together, and just very fortunate that we did it.
Well, it sounds like a magnificent experience, and talking to you, I can tell, how much you enjoyed it when you were there, and thank you very much for sharing that with us.
I have all documented it on my YouTube channel, so there's a playlist. So if anyone wants to go back and ask me some questions, please do. Yeah.
I will put that link into the show notes. That's brilliant, Floss. Thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to move on to Mike now, if that's okay. Regular listeners will know that Mike is one of the most travelled skiers out there. I'm not sure if he skied down the front of Mont Blanc, but he's already talked to us on the podcast about skiing destinations such as Turkey, Montenegro, the Brecon Beacons we mentioned, and he knows a lot about skiing in Japan. Most recently, I think he was on the show telling us about Rusutsu in Japan, and we were chatting at the London Ski Show, where he was helping people find out more about skiing in Turkey. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk a bit more about Japan, because I think it's something that's on everybody's bucket list. There's certainly Ski Club of Great Britain did some research earlier this year showing that it's right at the top of the list. You have lived there. You spent several winters living out there, didn't you, Mike?
When I first went there, I went just as a ski instructor in 2006, the winter of 2006, 2007, but I ended up staying for 3 years year-round then until the end of the winter of 2009. A couple of years back in the UK, and then I've been there every winter outside of COVID since. So over the course of sort of 18 years, I've spent mostly about 14, 15 winters there.
Yeah, that's not bad going. For most people, it's something on their bucket list where they might try and do like a 10-day or maybe a 2-week trip. And you've had, a lot of experience of it. When you were living out there, where did you base yourself then? I
was based in the Niseko resort area of southwest Hokkaido, where the majority of people, if it's their first entry point into skiing in Japan, they either go into the Hakodate Valley on Honshu on the main island out of Tokyo, or the gateway that they come into, Osaka. And then in the north, the very far north, Northern Ireland, you fly into New Chichose Airport, and then you travel down to the Niseko resort area, which is the most developed.
I thought it'd be interesting today. I mean, you know so much about skiing in Japan, but we were talking at the ski show about city-based skiing on Hokkaido, which is the northern island, and how it's relatively easy to travel around by train. So you can really build that trip of a lifetime into a kind of touring itinerary. So just to clarify then, Hokkaido is a North Island. How would you get in there? Where would you fly into?
You've got a number of options talking about the train angle. You can either fly Finnair, they were doing a direct flight from Europe. So they were doing UK to Helsinki, Helsinki to Sapporo, but I think that's kind of on hold at the moment. So New Chitose Airport is the airport on Hokkaido, just outside of Sapporo, the main city, the capital city of the prefecture. And you can either take an internal flight from Tokyo, Osaka, wherever you've come in on the South Island, or you can take use of these JR rail passes, which allows you to have unlimited rail travel for a period of time. So you could land, just take a one flight from the United Kingdom or US or you're outside and land in the Tokyo area. And then from there, you could use your JR pass then and travel the length of the Japanese southern island. And then there's a train tunnel that goes underneath the ocean and that takes you into Hokkaido. So a number of different ways to arrive.
Okay, that sounds really interesting, and I want to come back to the South Island in due course. But okay, let's look at Hokkaido. You suggested when we were chatting, at the show, that there are like different cities that you could use as a base to then do your skiing out from there. And my Japanese pronunciation probably isn't what it should be, but Hakodate, is that the first one?
So Hakodate is the southernmost city on Hokkaido, and when the train goes through the tunnel, that's the town or the city that it comes up to initially. Hakodate is a fabulous little city. It was one of the first that allowed non-Japanese visitors in to Japan, and as a consequence, there's a real mixed match of architecture. There's a very big Russian Orthodox because of the Russian seamen that came into that gateway and that port. So compared with a lot of Hokkaido, which is a fairly new island in real terms, 1850s is when it sort of really started kicking off and starting to get inhabited fully rather than the local indigenous population of the Ainu. So it's very much throw it up and see how long it lasts, tear it down and build it back up again. It's that sort of culture in Japan compared with the Southern Island. It's got temples and those kinds of things. But Hakodate as a city is very pretty because it's got this range of wonderful architecture.
If you're basing yourself there, where are you actually doing your skiing? What are the ski areas like? So,
I've just written a piece for Four Line Skiing magazine where I was skiing in Germany. And unlike this situation where when I was skiing in Wendelstein in Germany, you literally got on the train in the town. You took one stop down, you got off the train, you put your skis on, and then you skied down to the cable car. It's not that situation on Hokkaido where you've got these regional areas like, for example, Hakodate, and then once you're in the city and then you're traveling between the main cities, you're taking a bus then that's linked in with the train itself that takes you to those resorts, anything from 5 to 10 minutes to maybe an hour's travel, because some of the resorts are really close to the cities and some of them are a little bit further out. So depending where you go, you've got a broader choice of skiing available, and it depends what you're looking for.
And what type of skiing is out of Hakodate then?
So out of Hakodate, you've got 3 resorts. One is a really established resort with a gondola, cable car, lots of runs, wonderful sea views. And that takes about 45 minutes to get to from the main city. But then there are 2 resorts that are closer by that are sort of day hills for the weekend crowd that comes out of the city. But in the midweek, they're absolutely deserted. Lots of Japan outside of that Niseko bubble or the Hakuba bubble are very much 1, 2, 3 lift mountains that maybe have anything between 5 to 10 groomed runs. But the beauty of Japan is that everything you see between the runs is good to go. So as a consequence, then what looks very small on paper actually skis very, very big.
Yeah, and I think I've heard before that that vertical drop might not be as great, but you can just lap. If you're getting your famous Japao coming down, you can just lap and go down through it again and again.
Absolutely. And in the midweek, on any given day outside of the big major resorts, the only people you'll see are possibly octogenarians, because they live well in Japan and they ski into a long age, skiing for a couple of hours. Then you have schools groups, and then you might have the civil defense force learning to ski so they can travel through the mountains. And outside of that, you're just pretty much get on the chair, get to the top, do a lap and repeat with no queuing for lifts. And as you say, the vertical's not huge, but the beautiful thing is compared with some of these huge, 2,000 meter vertical mountains in the Alps is you might hit 3 or 4 different snow types and textures on the way down in your descent. Once you start and you're 2 or 3 turns in, and you're in the groove, you follow that groove all the way down. So it's a really confidence building snowpack and situation, because once you get it, you've got it for the day then, and you don't have to worry things are going to change.
So Hakodate, first town you come across if you were taking the train through the tunnel into Hokkaido from the south, the northern island. The next place that you mentioned to me is located more in the middle of Hokkaido, and I'm going to attempt Asahikawa.
Asahikawa is further north. So before you get to Asahikawa, you actually have to go via Sapporo. And then there's a branch offshoot then from Sapporo, a place called Otaru. So Sapporo was the host for the Olympic Games back in 1972. And there's one really fabulous resort, Sapporo Tignes, and then a number of smaller resorts, which are, Japan's very big, like Germany, for example, where they've got smaller resorts, but they're very big on the alternative winter sports. So Sapporo as a city has got lots of ski jumping hills because the Japanese really love ski jumping and they're pretty good at it. So you've got a number of smaller resorts out of Sapporo, the city. The main one is Sapporo Tignes, where they hosted the ladies' downhill and speed events for the 1972 Olympics. And from the city itself, you're talking a short bus ride from Sapporo city. So that's the first one. West of Sapporo, you've got Otaru, which is my favorite, which is a small port town where the ferry will come up from Honshu, the main island, the Niigata prefecture, and come into Otaru. A lot of fishing, great seafood restaurants, a lovely canal area when you're not skiing. So it's a touristy town. They do a lot of glass work there. So there's a lot to do that's very much different from going to the main centers like a Nishigo or a Rusutsu, where you're there. This Nishigo at the moment, because it's got a very international customer base and an international workforce, is similar to going to somewhere like a Tignes, where you've got a mountain, you've got lift structure, but you've got somewhat of a village town where you can stroll around. Rusutsu is more like something like a Verbier, where you've got this isolated cruise ship kind of feel where there's not a lot around it. It's all self-contained. Whereas when you go to somewhere like Otaru, you've got a proper town with proper Japanese life, day-to-day culture. You'll see far more there than you would if you went to somewhere like Nishigo, although the Nishigo setup for skiing is fantastic. And then out of Otaru itself, then you've got everything. It would be bus or taxi access, depending, how many people are in your group, because sometimes it would be as cheap to take a taxi for 4 people as it would be to take a bus for 2. And there are 4 to 5 smaller resorts, but over the course of a week or 10 days worth of skiing, you could easily do a day or 2 in each of them. The closest is Otaru Tenguyama, where it's a small resort, but it has night skiing. And if you went up there at sort of 2 or 3 in the afternoon in the wintertime, because the sun's going down around about 4:30, you can have a couple of hours of daytime skiing, and then you see the ocean, the port, the city below you turn from day to night. All the lights light up, and then you're skiing under floodlights, which is a very different experience, especially if it's snowing, and it snows right down to sea level in Japan. So as a consequence, you can be skiing at night under floodlights. That sort of lovely feeling where everything goes quiet. The snow is quiet because you're skiing on freshly fallen snow, but you've got these amazing views then of the city below you. And then from anything from 15-minute bus ride or taxi ride up to about 45 minutes, you've also got Asari, Sapporo Kokusai, Sapporo Tignes I just mentioned, and Kiroro, which is the most developed sort of residential resort.
Otaru sounds great. So let's say you're on this notional train tour. You've got your train pass. Maybe we've been down south. We've gone to Hakodate, we've gone to Otaru, and there is skiing in the middle of the island as well.
There is, yes. So you'd go then from sort of Hakodate to Sapporo or Otaru is about a 3-hour train journey, because the Shinkansen, which is the fast train, is only operated on the main island at the moment. So it's more of a regional train. It's more of a clickety-clack that stops you at most stations. It takes about 3 hours to get to that first part, that sort of Otaru Sapporo line. And then it's only another hour then from that line to get you to Asahikawa, which is the gateway to the central Hokkaido skiing, where lots of people are exploring more. It doesn't have as much snow, but that's relative. Instead of having 14, 15 meters a year, they'll have 10 or 11 meters of snow per year. It's a little bit colder because it's in the center of the island, so it's less affected by the fluctuations in the coastal, the maritime climate. And the snow's a little bit drier, stays drier for a little bit longer. But out of Asahikawa, which once again is another normal Japanese city where you'll see museums, art galleries, people going about their day-to-day lives, full Japanese restaurants, and not a gimmicky kind of Disneyland experience that you tend to get when you go to some of the resorts. You go to Asahikawa, you live that life. It's almost like you're commuting. The Omo Hotels, which is owned by one of the companies, Hoshino, which owns used to own Furano, now it owns Tomamu. They've got a hotel right in the middle of the city where you can stay very reasonable, around about £50 per person per night. That's even in the main part of the season. Small rooms, but it comes with breakfast. All you need really, because you're not going to spend much time, in your hotel. It's a very functional sort of a workers' hotel, but jazzed up. But they provide free transportation then from the hotel base to the ski resorts that are in that area.
It sounds great, and I'm loving this idea of discovering and doing a bit of tourism at the same time as having your skiing holiday, which I guess is probably always going to be the experience to a certain degree if you're going to a different culture like Japan. But my understanding, I think you're probably being quite diplomatic about it there, is that, if you wanted to criticize Niseko, then you might say it's the kind of Disneyland of skiing in Japan. And you probably have more, dare I use the word, authentic experience of Japan if you, explored some of these other places like Otaru or Hakodate.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And it's similar, you could do the same thing when lots of people were traveling to North America 10, 15 years ago because the price point was so much better than it is now and the lift pass prices were so much cheaper. Initially, people would go to Vail for a week, or they would go to somewhere on the East Coast, or they'd go to Whistler for a week. And then once people had been once, or they were comfortable knowing the area, then they'd start to do what was classed, a road trip, rent a car, travel around. And it's the same sort of scenario. If you've never been to Japan, you can't beat going to somewhere like Niseko or Rusutsu or the Hakuba places, the resorts in the Hakuba Valley, because you don't have to think. You just arrive, everything's set up for you. You can maximize your ski time for that particular holiday. But if you're looking for something very different and having more of a winter holiday with skiing, which includes culture, food, architecture, then the city break might be a better option.
Yeah, adding to my bucket list there, Mike, Japan is definitely somewhere that I'd like to go to. I think, as you know, I don't fly as often as I used to, or not at all at the moment. But a flight to Japan is definitely, in my carbon budget for the future. Let's just tackle cost a little bit. You mentioned, some of these smaller resorts. How much are we looking at for a day ticket if you wanted to go to one of these resorts?
So here's the example. So, for example, at the moment, a day ticket for Niseko is 10,500 yen a day, which is around about £55. For Rusutsu, it's 14,500 yen, which is about £75. So that's putting those price points in the sort of Zermatt and Val d'Isère kind of league for the day, because it's attracting that kind of customer that's coming from mainland China, United States, Europeans who've skied a lot of Europe, who want that different experience and have Michelin-starred restaurants, known brands and huge ski schools, and all that comes with it. As an example, if you stayed in Asahikawa, and I said you're paying sort of £50 a night for your accommodation, your lift tickets are going to be anything from around about £20 per day to about £35 per day. So as a consequence, you can have your bed and breakfast and the transport to the mountain, albeit a smaller mountain, and your lift ticket for the same price as a day ticket in some of the more developed resorts.
You make it sound better by the minute. to me, if you get to have a better cultural experience and, it's less expensive and there's fewer people, then that all sounds really good to me. And obviously you mentioned you can come up from the South Island, so you can do your tourism for Tokyo or Osaka or Hiroshima if you want to go there, as well. What about one final question for you? What do you think is the best time of the year to do this type of trip?
It's going to be busier, certainly in and around the more popular areas on Hokkaido in that January time, sort of just before Christmas through to the end of January, because that ties in with the Australian school summer holidays. And then sometimes there's an overlap with Chinese New Year, which is about a week-long holiday now. So sometimes Chinese New Year is a little bit like Easter, where it fluctuates over the course of the year. Sometimes it's in January, sometimes in February. But I think in terms of having longer days so that you can see a little bit more, it's not snowing as much, but you'll still have great snow. I'd say once Chinese New Year's finished, sort of that first week in February onwards would be a great time to travel around the area and the island and see more of it.
Well, that is brilliant, Mike. I'm sure listeners will have found that really interesting, as I have. And, I look forward to inviting you back on the show to discover some of the other places that you have been to around the world. And I'm sure you'll be tackling some interesting places this winter. But we're going to move on to the close now. I enjoy all feedback about the show. I like to know what you think, especially about our features. So please contact me on social at The Ski Podcast or by email theskipodcast@gmail.com. By the way, we now have some The Ski Podcast stickers back in stock. So if you'd like some of those, just email me and I'll drop them in the post to you. I've had a bit of feedback since the last episode. Rob Smith said, episode 225 was a great listen, really enjoying it. I'm aiming for Austria with the kids, so that advice on skiing for families, which we had from Nicole, was great. Judy Matthews said, thank you for continuing your fantastic podcast. Not a day goes by I don't think about the mountains or skiing. I think I live in the wrong country. I'm tempted as well, Judy, to move out there. Ella Purvis said, I've been loving the podcast, getting me hyped for the season ahead. I was just listening to the interview with Chemmy Alcott. It was such an inspiring, uplifting episode for women in snow sports. She is just incredible. And I can tell you, listener, if you haven't heard that episode, I've actually just published it as a YouTube video as well. So you can see Chemmy and myself having a chat. Finally, RichB on Snowhead said, there's been some great content on the pod recently. The interview with Chemmy Alcott was really interesting. Didn't know her backstory. So one of the interesting bits of feedback I had in the survey is that some listeners said, they don't listen to the special interviews. They like the regular episodes. And I suggest just dip into those interviews because, they are great. I honestly don't invite people onto the show unless they're really interesting. Right, there are now 236 episodes of the Ski Podcast to catch up with. 168 of those were listened to in the last week. You can do that too. There's loads to listen to in our back catalogue. Just have a search around the tags and categories at theskipodcast.com. If you like the podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. Follow us. Just look for that button and press it now. Give us a review or leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and book your ski hire with Intersport Rent using the code Ski Podcast or taking the link in the show notes. And finally, I mentioned WhatsApp. We have a WhatsApp channel now. Just search through WhatsApp channels and you should be able to find us, or I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But for today, I would like to thank my guest today, Floss. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Iain. That was great.
Enjoy your skiing in Tignes this winter. And Mike, thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure, as always. And I'm very interested to hear Floss's experience on Mont Blanc, because that's one I've wanted to do for a long time. But that's a challenge, that's for sure.
Unusually, although when I talk to lots of guests, I'm adding things onto my, my to-do list, my bucket list. Skiing down Mont Blanc is yet to appear on that. Finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.